Today we are back on the LS swap project that we're doing on the Syclone. Basically, it's a second gen Chevy S10 that we are stuffing a V8 in and a full-time all-wheel drive system. And I now call it the Syclone mainly because it irritates you guys so much. I like the name. I like factory stuff. What can I say? Anyway, my goal for this episode is to get all of the remaining major important parts of the drivetrain mounted up so we can do all the plumbing very, very soon and get this thing fired up. Now, anytime I build a car, I just think of it as like a giant game of connect the dots. And the first job is just getting all those dots mounted. So we have our 5.3 mounted under the hood, which did require some custom motor mounts and a custom oil pan. We have our exhaust manifolds in place. We have our coils mounted up, which did require a hydro boost conversion on this side, which is now 100% done. I did get that little push rod in there that I was waiting on. Intake manifold sitting in place. I finally received all the little elbows that I need for the heater core conversion, we'll call it. I'll show you that a little bit later. I even mounted the coolant tank, but the big obvious piece that's missing right now is right up here, namely the accessory drive, the cooling fans, and a radiator. All very important to having a functioning car, or truck in this case. As you can see, we have a cooling fan and radiator combo over here. I'm not sure if it's going to work yet. It's promising. I think it'll fit, but until I get the accessory drive fully mounted up, I'm not really going to know for sure. The big one's the upper radiator hose. But this is all going to require some customization. So let's do it. So first thing we're going to get started on is swapping out the original truck harmonic balancer for this guy that we picked up. It's from a Corvette. It's just a Dorman one. Long term, I'll probably replace this again with like an overdrive CTSV balancer, but I think there's like $100. So it'll fit with our new spacing. We're gonna try to get everything sucked as close to the motor as possible. I already have the bolt cracked loose. Got a little flywheel holder up in there. You probably can't barely see it, but we'll just get this pulled off, get swapped out with the correct spacing one. All right, with the two balancers side by side, you can see why we're switching. We got ourselves another 1.5 inches of belt spacing clearance, which we're gonna need. So I've got the harmonic balancer and the water pump installed, and if I haven't mentioned it yet, this is Corvette spacing, which basically brings all of the pulleys as close to the engine as possible. That's going to allow us the most room that we are desperately going to need to mount a radiator and a cooling fan. But now, because we changed the spacing from what this engine came with, the truck brackets that I have are no longer going to work, which they wouldn't really be ideal anyway for what we going on down here. If you do any sort of an LS or an LT swap, you're gonna know who Holley is, and that is the place that we went, of course, to get our accessory drive, and they sent us over pretty much everything that you see here. This is their high mount Corvette spacing LS accessory drive kit, and you can configure this a couple different ways if you want with like an air conditioning compressor. I chose the one that just has the power steering pump and the alternator because I think later on we'll do a low mount factory location AC compressor, and then we're also going to be doing the LSA accessory drive later, which will work in conjunction with what we've got going on here. So it comes with the 130 amp alternator, comes with the power steering pump and the little AN adapter that we're going to need to run our custom hoses. Comes with the power steering pulley, idler pulley, bolts, brackets, tensioner, pretty much everything that you need to get this guy up and running. But my favorite part, honestly, is just the bracket, because this thing is made from cast aluminum, which is an OEM style, and it's just a lot cleaner and simpler than some of those other aftermarket, like multiple plate and spacer designs. So simple installation, one part number comes with pretty much everything that you need. Now, also worth mentioning is if you are watching this video on the day it goes live, tomorrow, Holley is kicking off their Holidays promotion. Starts on the 18th of November and it goes pretty much until the end of the year. And they're offering 10% off on 6,200 or some odd crazy amount of part numbers across their line, 10% off. And I got a link below this video that you can check it out. But the Holidays promotion, like I said, 10% off starting tomorrow, November 18th until the end of the year. So check them out if you're doing any sort of an LS swap. We love Holley. I use their stuff all the time. And like I said, this bracket kit is really, really simple. So let's get started. I kind of made some marks here and here, so just kind of put it somewhere maybe in the middle of that. I'll try. Need 12 hands to do this. All right, try that. There we go. Pretty close, right? Yeah, right in the middle of the mark. All right. Okay, that's what size belt we need. So we need a 6-rib belt approximately 80 3/8 of an inch. So our game of Connect the Dots is actually coming along very nicely. I'm really happy with how the Holley high mount accessory drive turned out. I'm glad we made the decision to do that instead of trying to jam the truck accessories in here. The Corvette spacing gives us the room we need, and the high mount clears everything on the chassis very, very nicely. So the alternator, it sits up and high, out of the way. It doesn't hit anything over here. Power steering pump down there has tons of room around the steering box. So yeah, it all fits nicely. I did go ahead and get the 4.3 radiator in place, but the only bad thing now is this kind of gives me a few more challenges that I have to solve. There's a couple different radiators that are commonly used in these swaps, and one of the most popular is the 4.3 radiator. They have great cooling capacity, and a lot of times people will pair them up with this. It's like a 99 Dodge Intrepid cooling fan. This will sort of kind of fit the core, and I need to do a little bit of custom bracketry to make it fit. But seeing the radiator and the alternator together for the first time, it makes me think about this situation, because I initially intended to have the air intake with a 4-inch aluminum tube come off the front of the throttle body, take a turn, go this way, and then have the filter right here where the factory one did. However, with the upper radiator hose and the alternator, I don't think there's enough space to have a 4-inch tube sitting on top of that. And I don't think I have enough room to go below it because the fan motors are going to sit here. So what I may do, I'm still not sold entirely, but I may find a different radiator. A lot of swap guys will actually recess the 4.3 radiator into the core support, which would work, but I'm not keen on that idea, mainly because you have to cut a lot of the core support away. I am probably going to go with a dual pass radiator that'll fit actually inside the core support. So instead of sitting behind it, it'll sit underneath kind of in this opening, which will be a slightly smaller radiator. But if I run a dual pass design, the upper hose then moves from that side over to this side. So it'd be very similar to like a CTSV radiator. So the upper hose would come you know, out, over, and in. That would free up space that I need over there, and it still should allow me enough space to have the CTSV accessory drive here, the battery here, air conditioning stuff in here. So I think that's what I am going to do. Not sure yet. I'll do a little bit more thinking on it and let you know my answer by the end of this video. But in the meantime, let's talk about those heater tubes in galvanic corrosion. For the naturally aspirated phase of our build, we're running a Trailblazer SS intake manifold. It's going to make lots of power, but the only bad thing is it wants to occupy the same space as the heater core tubes. Now, my solution, I showed you guys last time, I'm just going to be using some copper plumbing elbows to reroute the heater core tubes up and around the back of the intake manifold. Now, I know it'll give me the space that I need, but a lot of you guys were worried about a process called galvanic corrosion, which is going to occur between two dissimilar metals when they're in contact with one another, and that could basically cause this connection to fail at some point in the future. Now, you guys are definitely on the right track, but here's why I think this might not be an issue. Number one, I'm using JB Weld epoxy to join the two together. And galvanic corrosion occurs mainly when the two dissimilar metals are in direct contact with one another. At least that's the way I understand it. And JB Weld is actually an insulative material. It's not going to conduct ions or whatever between the two metals. So I think that's going to go a long way to helping us. Also, most modern coolants like we're going to be running are going to have some sort of anti-corrosion properties in them. So I hope and I think that this corrosion issue will be a non-issue. But of course, there's only one way to find out. But this is honestly a fairly low risk repair right now, because even if it does fail, that just means we're going to leak it a little bit of coolant, and I could just temporarily bypass the heater core, or I could just swap out to the other intake manifold that I have and then put a stock heater core in and be on our way. Now, I realize there probably are going to be some mixed opinions out there about how this repair is going to hold up in the long run, or whether or not it's going to work at all. And if I'm being totally honest with you guys, yeah, there probably are a dozen different ways that we could have come up with a solution for this problem. But given the constraints that we have to work with, mainly the space between the firewall and the back of the intake, I think this is a pretty good solution. But there's only one way to tell if this is actually going to work, and that's just to try it. So you guys have my word. If this thing fails, I'll let you know, because I'll show you whatever solution we come up with for phase two. I think, my opinion, there's probably an 80 to 90% chance that we'll have success, and that last little 10% of doubt is only because I'm kind of worried if I got enough JB Weld in between the seam, and like if when I push it together, if any moved out of the way. That's the only doubt in my mind, because I know the JB Weld is going to bond very well to both the copper and the aluminum. So as long as I got a good even coverage, I think we'll be in business. So anyway, like I said, I'll show you guys whatever happens. Now, I did start on the fuel line. You can kind of see it goes up the rail here, runs over the Hydro Boost, and it goes down below. I still have a couple of clamps to put on, but then I sort of went down one of those like major ADHD rabbit holes where you do 10 different things. I started out having to order one 45-degree hose end for the PTFE because I didn't have enough to route it the way that I wanted to. So I got one of those on the way, but then that started me down the path of I need to order a few more hose ends for the power steering. I thought I had some, but then as I started going through my stuff, I realized I have AN plumbing supplies everywhere in probably 6 or 7 different drawers and places and boxes and shelves. And so I had to like take the next hour or two and just completely reset and reorganize all of my AN stuff. Now, I've got over here some of the Earl's power steering hose, which that stuff's good, like 2,500 PSI. But then that does require a specific hose end and adapter, which I did not have. But then that's kind of how I started in this mess, because I have got like hose ends and adapters everywhere of different sizes, different functions. They work with different types of hose. So I had to just organize everything, put it all in one place. And I mean, just look at this over here. Like this section right here, this is just weld bungs, because every time I'll order, say here's a -10 stainless. I don't even know why I have that. I've got a couple of -10 aluminum ones for, say, turbo drains or valve cover vents. But every time I do a project like that, I'll order 2 or 3. I'll put the extra ones in a drawer or somewhere, and I'll forget about them. And then I'll find them later on, then I'll move them to another place. And so now I've organized everything, and it's all in one place, and I know exactly what I have and what I do not have. So I've got a few more fittings on the way, and it's time to go home for tonight, so we'll pick things up in the morning. So one of the last things I need to get mounted is a transmission cooler. Radiator, still working on that. I think I'm just gonna order one. But I do want to get the trans cooler mounted so I can get the lines going from the transmission to the cooler so I can actually fire this thing up. Don't technically need a radiator just to fire it up for the first time, but I do need a trans cooler because otherwise fluid would just get pumped everywhere. So let's take this off. Oh, that was easy. All right, so this is the transmission cooler I'm planning on running. It's the TrueCool 40K, the same one that everybody runs. Got one in the ugly truck, got one in pretty much everything I build. It's big. It's gonna keep the transmission nice and cool, but we're gonna have to do some creative thinking to get this mounted, and then also figure out where we're gonna do our supercharger heat exchanger down the road, because that's also going to require some real estate up here. So, thinking cap's on. But for now, I want to mount this, I think, in here, like I'll cut and rearrange this guy, and we'll sort of do that. So first thing we'll do, just make a little bit of clearance in this guy to go over the trans cooler. So there is a little bit of an offset in the core support that'll be represented by that wood block there. So this would sort of kind of clear, but I want to give myself a little bit extra right there. All right, I got my upper bracket more or less mapped out. I just got to put a couple of holes in the core support here. We're going to use that factory hole, kind of mimic it over here, and then just space this guy out a little bit. You probably can't tell, but I already measured these out, and I got a little center punch exactly where I want the hole. All right, so I got the bracket kind of mocked out here on this cardboard. I just used the cooler itself to kind of make some references. It's going to start with a angle bracket like this that'll offset it, and then this piece will sort of make up the difference. Put a hole in the middle just to kind of lighten it, but I just need to kind of transfer this over to my new pattern. All right, so this first bracket is gonna go something like that. Mainly just do this so I get a little bit of paint underneath where the little rib nut insert's gonna go. Now, from this perspective, it looks like we actually made backwards progress this week because the truck is actually more torn apart than it was when we started. But believe it or not, our little game of connect the dots is pretty much done, or the first half of mounting the dots. The transcooler was kind of the last major unknown, and we've got it to the point where it's like 85% done. I still have to build a bottom bracket, but those are easy because that's just going to be a perfectly straight shot, straight down. Same thing over there. I am going to redo this upper bracket for the power steering cooler because I'm going to run that still. I'll do the same thing top and bottom, just cut this off, add a little bit longer leg on there so it still attaches to the factory spots. And then where I had to notch around the hood support or the hood latch support, I'm just going to neaten this up a little bit and add some round rod that'll be welded on just to kind of pretty up and strengthen it up a little bit. And then finally over here with this plastic air duct, we just got to do a little bit of trimming, but I still want to run that because it'll be just a nice way to have the air kind of directed right up into the radiator and the transmission cooler and ultimately the heat exchanger, which will come along with a supercharger, but I don't know where we're going to put it because, believe me, this space is filling up quick. The only other unknown right now, I told you we talk about it, is the radiator, and I have made a decision. We are actually, in fact, this morning, I placed the order for a new radiator. I was very hesitant because it's an expensive radiator, but it's going to do everything that I want, or so they say. We'll find out when it shows up. But I know the 4.3 radiator is a decent solution. I just was not keen on how much cutting you'd have to do to recess it into the core support. And then I really wanted a dual pass design because that will move the upper neck from the driver's side over to the passenger side. That way I have plenty of room for the air intake, which is going to be very critical when we have, well, not only now, but when we have the LSA supercharger. So, yeah, that's pretty much it though in terms of getting things mounted. So now all we have to do to get this thing fired up is to plumb a few remaining items. And the list is actually kind of short. We have to just build 2 AN lines to go from the new transcooler right down there to those hard lines I built for the transmission cooler. They're just capped off now. So 2 hoses there. We've got to get the computer flashed. I did pick up a computer, by the way, just a PO1 junkyard PCM. Still waiting on a mount. That's just a later model S10 factory piece. We have a wiring harness. I've had that for quite some time. That should be plug and play, so that should be pretty simple. We got to get the fuel line finalized. I've got it more or less done. I just have to put 1 hose end on it and a little bit more heat wrap in the middle. Of course, you know, fender liner back in, bumper back on. But that's kind of it for starting it up, which I'm really excited about. And I think it'll happen next time. Oh, by the way, don't forget to check out Holley Days if you guys need to buy anything from Holley for your swap project or for your muscle car or for whatever you have. It is 10% off starting tomorrow, the 18th of November, on 6,200 and some product lines. And they gave me a list here. I mean, it's Sniper EFI, Holley EFI intakes, carburetors, Flowmaster exhaust, MSD ignition, even Simpson race stuff. So if you need a helmet or a fire suit, Bear brakes, and a whole lot more. So check them out. There will be a link below this video. Check out Holley Days. Thank you guys for watching. Come back soon for the first fire up of the 2nd gen Syclone.